Hello, and welcome to the 7th Annual AAKP Global Summit on Kidney Disease Innovations, entitled The Decade of the Kidney at Midpoint: Opportunities and Barriers to Greater Innovation and Freedom from Disease and Disability. This event is proudly hosted by the American Association of Kidney Patients in collaboration with our allied partners at the George Washington University School of Medicine and Health Sciences. My name is Glenda Roberts, and I'm honored to serve as an AAKP National Ambassador. I'm a kidney transplant recipient from Washington State. Currently, I'm also the Director of Communications and Patient Engagement for the Mount Sinai Center for Kidney Disease Innovation, as well as the Director of Communications for the NIH-funded Kidney Precision Medicine Project. My journey with kidney disease is closely aligned with my professional career, since I almost didn't get my first job because of concern about protein in my urine. As I've evolved from a software developer to a senior business executive at companies like Microsoft and General Electric, I was discouraged from speaking out about my kidney disease. Being involved in AAKP allows me to serve as the voice of the patient, ensuring that our priorities, preferences, and desired outcomes are reflected in AAKP's education and advocacy initiatives that are designed to make life better for people living with kidney diseases. Since 2019, the Global Summit has served the global community as the largest patient-led kidney disease innovation summit in the world. This year's Global Summit marks an important milestone because it is the midpoint of the AAKP-led Decade of the Kidney. This global initiative has been mirrored around the world by kidney advocates, medical allies, government officials, and among people of goodwill committed to a return to true patient-centered medicine. Throughout the first half of the Decade of the Kidney, we have raised awareness about the increasing burdens of kidney diseases worldwide among people, communities, workforces, and governments. This effort has also accelerated a golden era of medicine and the determination to transcend status quo treatments, including brick-and-mortar dialysis, to a future of kidney care that will be determined by expansions in patient consumer care choice, targeted therapies that stop kidney disease and prevent kidney failure, greater access to donated organs, new devices, and alternatives to human organs, including the artificial, wearable, and implantable kidneys and xenotransplantation. We believe the time is now, as we move through the next 5 years, for patients, care partners, clinicians, researchers, innovators, industry, and government leaders to accelerate our bold actions to push forward modern diagnostics, devices, and therapeutics, and continue to remove outdated policies that block their adoption. No country is immune to the impacts of kidney disease, but the good news is every person watching has a role in the shaping of the future for all people at risk for or living with kidney diseases that offers more hope, better outcomes, and greater independence and freedom from disease and disability. With that, I'm honored to serve as the moderator for our session entitled Predictive Safety Testing Consortium Leads to Biomarker Data Repository. This session will explore how patients, scientists, and doctors are working together to use biomarkers to help make medicine safer and more effective for patients with kidney disease and other conditions. We're excited to welcome a group of global experts who are helping lead this important work, and I personally have the pleasure of working with this initiative. Joining us are Dr. Gary Friedman, who is part of the Predictive Safety Testing Consortium and helps to oversee a large, secure database of health information called the Biomarker Data Repository. This database supports research on how to better predict and prevent side effects from medicines. Ms. Katrina Peron is the Associate Director of the same consortium. She works with scientists, companies, and regulators to help create and approve new safety testing using biomarkers. Ms. Peron has a strong background in medical engineering and has helped develop technologies like artificial hearts. Dr. Patrick Murray is a doctor and professor from Dublin, Ireland. He takes care of patients with kidney disease and also teaches and leads research. Dr. Murray has worked in hospitals in the US and Ireland and has spent many years studying how to prevent and treat sudden kidney disease injuries caused by illness and medication. Dr. Joe Bonaventura is a world-renowned kidney researcher and professor at Harvard School of Medicine and MIT. He leads the renal division of Brigham and Women's Hospital. His research focuses on how kidneys get injured and how they can be repaired, and he has helped develop cutting-edge tools like kidney organoids, which are tiny little models grown from stem cells. And lastly, Dr. Stefan Sultana, a medical director and expert in kidney safety at AstraZeneca in the UK. He brings more than 20 years of experience in drug development and biomarker research to help ensure that new treatments are both safe and effective for patients, especially those with kidney concerns. These leaders are part of a global effort to use better science and data to protect patients and improve treatments. Please join me in welcoming our panel. We'll begin with Dr. Friedman and Ms. Peron.
Thank you, Glenda. I want to thank you, the American Association of Kidney Patients, and the George Washington University for this opportunity to contribute to today's event. I just want to make clear that everything I'm going to be speaking about from these slides will be contained in the attached slide presentation for your use and learning after the session is over. Biomarkers are near and dear to the work that we as nephrologists have been engaged in for more than 3 decades. The Critical Path Institute created the Biomarker Data Repository in order to bring to patients the real benefits of new biomarkers to aid in their understanding of their future of their kidney-related illness. I want to give you an overview, first and foremost, of what a biomarker is, and then we'll get a bit into the structure of that biomarker data repository and how it converts the raw material of data into actual clinical practice in some near future timeframe. The question we're posing on the slide, what is a kidney biomarker, can be answered in many different ways. But first and foremost, we want to make clear that you already instinctually know what a biomarker is and what it does. We say this because when you look at the 4th bullet point here, it tells you that you can think of serum creatinine, serum cystatin C, blood urea nitrogen, and urine dipsticks, like for albuminuria. Those are standard of care biomarkers that you and your nephrologist look to at every single office visit. These biomarkers have been utilized for years, and you use them, your nephrologists use them, researchers use them. The cartoon figure that you see here is a microscopic view of what one filtering unit does in the kidneys. Each of you is born with approximately 6 million of these spread across your 2 kidneys. If these stay open, filtering normally, you have healthy kidney function. To the right, there are 4 boxes. You see in the top box the kidney biomarkers that you're already well versed in from your experience in your nephrologist's office. These give you a stick figure understanding of you as a human being between your serum creatinine, your serum cystatin C, the amount of albumin, and the amount of protein that you have in the urine. This tells you at a very basic level whether your kidney function is stable or not. What we really want to do is to convert from thinking about each patient, each of you, as a stick figure. We want to blossom you into a skeleton, a more full picture of what is underlying your kidney health. And the three boxes that you see, one regarding the proximal tubule, one regarding the loop of Henle, and one regarding the distal tubule, each of these newer biomarkers has been now studied in prospective studies, data of which is about to be submitted to the Food and Drug Administration and then to the EMA in Europe. The intent of these is to give a more 3D image of you as a human being. We know that there are unmet needs that you have in terms of wanting to know what does the future hold for you in terms of your kidney function and its stability. And what we know is through the Critical Path Institute Biomarker Data Repository, by acquiring more and more data from the prospective studies that we have completed of nearly 200 patients, but also through working closely in collaboration with academic researchers who've used the biomarkers and with pharmaceutical drug development companies who have used the newer biomarkers in their clinical trials. We want to acquire more and more of this data, put it into a singular space where qualified researchers can examine and interrogate that information. Ultimately, we want to move from the stick figure of you as a human being to that skeleton, and then move with further collaborations to look at you as a three-dimensional human being so that we understand how your kidney function is doing and which direction it appears to be heading in a more specific fashion so that you can monitor and feel confident and have all the advantages of information that we've been gathering through collaborative research. The biomarker data repository, you can look at it as a raw material. So for those of you who do woodworking or you do sculpture or you work with clay as pottery, you can look at the biomarker data repository data as the raw material. Through the Critical Path Institute, in addition to providing controlled access to de-identified, meaning data where your privacy is protected. So the Critical Path Institute can provide the raw material, but additionally, it provides the data analytics platform. And that's the toolkit, a very sophisticated toolkit that allows you to use the raw material and shape it into more meaningful, understandable results. By making this raw material, the data, available in a publicly facing repository and making sure that patients who have contributed their time and effort to clinical research and then having researchers meet certain qualification standards to be able to properly access this information. This takes the research that we have been doing over the past 15 to 20 years and makes it so that it is transformable into standard of care new tests that you and your nephrologist can utilize in your office. There's a lot of detail in this view of the data analytics platform. Going from left to right, you see the inflow of data, the raw material. You see in the center all of the curation and data management that is necessary to make it so that this data can be understood and analyzed by a regulatory agency or an individual researcher at a university or by you as a patient in conjunction with your patient organization. And this translates into the right space, right side space here, into actionable solutions. So these biomarkers, the understanding how they perform during drug trials or during academic observational trials, we can then understand with more and more data accruing, we can see how thousands, 10,000s, and even hundreds of thousands of patients, how their biomarkers change in response to some type of event in their life. And this can then translate into an individual patient's personalized understanding by them and their nephrologist of how they are faring. In order to accomplish the mission of the biomarker data repository, meaning to provide that information, that raw material, to researchers who can then use the data analytics platform and transform this into actionable tools that impact kidney patients' lives and guides their nephrologists in the use of these biomarkers, it requires a team. Glenda and I jointly function as the oversight chairs of the biomarker data repository. The work that is required to be done falls into four major categories, and because of that, there are many people, some of whom are known to you, and all of whom are on this call today. These are just some of the people who contribute to how we communicate and how we create publications so you know what the accruing data is showing. The importance of this information is not just for researchers, not just for nephrologists, but for you as patients. You can, by understanding this information as well as you understand your serum creatinine or your EGFR or any other biomarker that you already know, if you know how to interpret these newer biomarkers, that can give you an idea of, are you in a comfortable place or are you in a worrisome place? Because personalized data, individual patient data, has to be protected, there are legal experts who are involved with how these data are acquired, how they are brought into the biomarker data repository, how they're then shared with qualified researchers, and we make sure that from a legal perspective, all parties are behaving appropriately and optimally. There are a number of technical aspects that go in the use of such data. And from utilizing standard biostatistical measurements and tactics to utilizing artificial intelligence and machine learning to understand a more dynamic understanding of how these biomarkers are trending over time. There are technical experts that advise the Biomarker Data Repository Oversight Committee, and we're grateful for everybody's input. In summary, these key points in terms of making data available, the resource available to researchers, not just at the Critical Path Institute, but at all academic and pharmaceutical development and patient care organization, patient advocacy organizations. We know the steps that are necessary to be able to share this information. By expanding the understanding and the use of these newer drug injury biomarkers or kidney injury biomarkers across a wider swath of men, women, and children of all ethnicities, all races, we understand that there will be a broadened picture that will be relevant to more and more people on a personal basis. These newer biomarkers are already being utilized in clinical trials, and some of my colleagues will talk about that in later portions of this presentation. These are already being utilized, but they will be utilized in clinical practice and in further research and development so that they create benefit for you and your nephrologist in the clinical office. I'd like to introduce Katrina Peron, who's an associate director at the Critical Path Institute. Katrina?
Thank you, Gary, for the wonderful introduction. And thank you, AAKP and George Washington University for the opportunity to present today. So I will be presenting more details related to the biomarker data repository, specifically how to access and contribute data to it. As Dr. Friedman briefly mentioned the BMDR platform and showed some diagrams of data flows, I wanted to provide a visual of what it really looks like. So this is the landing page for all CPAP data collections, and you can see here in the green box a link to this specific EMDR data collection. Users would just need to create an account to be able to view data collections, and this link would prompt you to do that or to log in if you already have an account. The next slide has more details of the data currently on the repository. So currently on the BMDR, we have almost 700 subjects, which includes mostly clinical humans, and then some non-clinical, which is rats in this case. And these range across both phase 1 and observational clinical studies, looking at healthy volunteers, we have a big portion of, and then specific conditions of cancer and diabetes. We're currently in talks with several organizations to contribute up to 10 additional clinical data sets, including from the CRIC study, which is a cohort study of chronic renal insufficiency, as well as from chronic kidney disease, from chronic transplant pediatric patients, lupus nephritis, pediatric data, and studies on Alport syndrome. All of these studies would help increase the total number of subjects that we'd have in the BMDR, which would increase the capabilities of the repository and the kinds of analyses that can be performed. It would also help expand our knowledge beyond healthy volunteers and into other populations. So for data to be added to the BMDR, a data contribution agreement, or DCA, is executed with the data owner. That enables the data owner to indicate any special circumstances around the data that users would need to abide by. Data use agreements, or DUAs, are executed with requesters of data from the repository. Both these contracts ensure that the data is protected throughout the entire process and that it can't be de-identified and personal information doesn't end up where it should not be. Contracts also dictate the level of data sharing that the data owners allow and if there are any specific restrictions that needed to be adhered to. The visual on the right of this slide is a very simplified view of how data goes into the BMDR and who can analyze it on the Data and Analytics Platform, or the DAP. The DAP is that virtual environment where data is controlled and can be accessed and interrogated. This visual doesn't include all of the quality checks or safety and security measures that are taken on the data during this process, because he's really a black box figure here. So this is what the BMDR data collection looks like on the platform. This shows each of the study names, and here we just have generic ones, a brief description of the study, when the data sets were added to the repository, and when they were last updated. On the far right, the little green square symbols let users know if the data sets are requestable. This slide shows what it looks like when you click on an individual study. You can see the type of study, what format the data is in. This particular one is in SDTM, which stands for Study Data Tabulation Model. That is the data standard used in clinical trials to organize and format data for regulatory submission, and it's the preferred formatting of data going into the BMDR. Also displayed are keywords about the study, what language the study is in, what group at CPAP it's related to. So this one is the PSTC, the Predictive Safety Testing Consortium, and what type of approval is needed if somebody requests the data. And that would go to a specific review committee. From here on this page, you can request the data if it's requestable as determined by the data owner, and then also view demographic details of the study in the cohort builder. The cohort builder shows some of the capabilities here. It's a tool that can show the study demographics and details to users that they can help determine what studies they may be interested in requesting and analyzing. The upper left image, and I know there's small text, don't need to read the text, But that shows a plot of the frequency for severity of adverse events in a cancer study in this case, with a table at the bottom with total numbers. So you can get a good view of who is in what bin. The bottom right screenshot shows the age demographics of another study. These are just a couple examples of what you can see in the cohort builder, really getting an idea of the populations. If you find a data set that you're interested in analyzing, you can then request it straight from this platform. And for the request, you would provide information on the project, what you're looking at, what you're planning to use the data for, and the requesters or organization's information. Once that request is submitted, it goes to a review committee and takes about a week for a response. Once determined if you can get the data or not, you'll get a notification with next steps for executing a data use agreement. So once a request is approved and a data use agreement has been executed, the data will populate in a workspace assigned to the user on the DApp. And the data set can be analyzed in real time right there. The DApp has built-in tools that you can see on the right-hand side, which include RStudio and Jupyter, and you can also open a virtual machine to work from. It has applications like a Shiny apps here, and with these tools, you can load in scripts into the workspace. An example script is shown here on the left. But really, these tools allow users to create different varying visualizations of multiple data sets at a time, all within the DApp. For organizations to contribute their data to the BMDR, they can contact the BMDR email address provided here, or myself, Katrina Peron, or Nick King with our emails provided here as well. And we can begin discussions on the process and answer questions that you may have. We can discuss what type and format the data should be in and provide details on the transfer process. Once it's determined to transfer data, we would execute that data contribution agreement with the data owner and then transfer the data through a secure server. We use Amazon Web Services, and that goes to CPATH. CPATH's Data Collaboration Center then performs quality checks on the data and can standardize it if needed into the correct format. Once the data is formatted correctly and QC'd by CPATH, it's then loaded onto the BMDR, and that would appear in the data collection that we previewed a few slides ago. Besides contributing data to BMDR, there are other ways to be involved with us, and we would love any involvement people are willing to provide. Anybody can join the BMDR Community Engagement Committee that Dr. Friedman spoke about, and we would welcome additional members from the kidney disease community to provide input on how they may be impacted by kidney disease and the relevance of BMDR to them. That specific community ensures the diversity of the data sets that are obtained by BMDR and what we go after, and they provide essential input to our strategic vision. Additionally, members of the BMDR committees can rotate on the BMDR Oversight Committee, and that includes other representatives from academia, patient groups, nonprofits, pharmaceutical companies, and other biotech companies. That oversight committee is responsible for the functional, strategic, and tactical aspects of BMDR. So the participation and input from these groups helps lead patients and the community having more knowledge about kidney biomarkers, and we hope that encourages productive conversations with individuals and their care teams, where patients feel comfortable asking specifically about kidney biomarkers. This also leads to the overall goal that we have as BMDR to qualify biomarkers that can be used in clinical practice. To find out more information on the BMDR and to learn how we are working to qualify new biomarkers, you can visit our website, which can be found at the QR code shown here. And the website has links to these listed resources. And on this slide is our FDA acknowledgement of funding, which can also be viewed on our website. And so that was all that we had for our presentation portion. And I'd like to pass it back to Glenda now for the panel discussion, where we will answer specific questions on the biomarker data repository and how that relates to the patient community. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Friedman and Ms. Peron. These innovations in research and collaborations are not just advancing science, they're offering real hope to patients and families around the world. I'd now like to bring in the rest of the panel to join the discussion and pose a few questions. Let's start with Doctors Murray and Bonaventure. As a patient, I'm interested in understanding how BMDR and biomarkers would potentially be of use or meaningful to you in office practice or during a clinical study.
Thank you for your question, Glenda. To begin with, I think success for patients and for doctors is when something like the BMDR accelerates development of new tests to improve patient care. And success means that instead of talking about biomarkers of acute kidney injury, we're talking about new tests that are being used in practice. And we're getting there in some locations with some markers, but we're not through the journey yet. So for me, acute kidney injury is a major problem in every hospital and clinic in the world. There are patients seen with deteriorating kidney function that happens over hours or days, multiple times a day in every hospital and clinic. And it's a massive problem for us all to take care of. We manage this as best we can, but with better, more precise tools to tell us whether there's damage to the kidneys or not, we can do much more precise and accurate treatment. We can reverse the acute kidney injury and improve outcomes for patients. And that's what it's all about. It's having better information from better tools that have been proven, qualified, validated, and marketed. And that's what we want. So I think for me, success will be that we don't talk about biomarkers of kidney injury at all, but we talk about new tests.
Well, thank you. Just to add, I think, from the perspective of a patient and the physician who is taking care of the patient or involved in their care, patients want to know whether they have any kidney problem. And these biomarkers, as you've learned about in Dr. Friedman's talk, can tell you in a much more precise way whether or not, on one hand, whether you have any kidney problem, and also can give you and your physician some insight into what part of the kidney might be most involved. And that could then rationalize some targeted therapeutic approaches. You also, as a patient, want to know maybe are you susceptible to getting kidney injury if your physician is introducing a new drug that he or she thinks will treat your disease, whether it's kidney or not, or process involving the kidney. So you want to know what the degree of your kidney function, but also your kidney injury is to start with, and whether you're likely to benefit or to potentially not benefit from a agent, a drug that is given to you. So both you and your physician can do things in much more thoughtful way. The biomarkers that we have and use routinely right now are not very sensitive. They're useful. They're very useful. They give us important information, but we need so much more information if we're really going to make your care as safe as possible and as directed as possible. And also, another aspect of things, as we use the kind of data that we will be accumulating in the repository, will be predictive data on which therapeutic agents you specifically are most likely to benefit from and which ones to stay away from. And also provide data where if you have some degree of acute problem, are you more likely to progress to more chronic kidney disease? And if you are, then what kind of therapeutic approach should we take to prevent that or to mitigate it? So thank you.
Great, thank you. That was very helpful and very practical information, so it's much appreciated. Let's transition to Dr. Friedman. Dr. Friedman, with the growth in the volume of BMDR data, how do you see that as a value add?
Thank you, Glenda, for posing that question. I want to refer back to what Dr. Bonventuri just brought forward. During the course of having your nephrologist offer treatments to you, if you know that your new kidney biomarkers are showing that there does not seem to be something new developing, so before you start a new medication, if things appear rather stable with these new biomarkers, then shortly after introduction of, say, a new antihypertensive or a new immunomodulator, after starting the treatment, the biomarkers could be repeated in the office. And then you could see if they continue to appear, they continue to rise, or if they return to a lower state, a more improved state. So the utility of these biomarkers need to be understood by applying them in more and more controlled circumstances and setting in advance a plan for how you're going to use these, how you're going to test them, how frequently you're going to test them, and put these into a plan that a regulatory agency can look at, analyze, and come to agreement with you as the researcher to create a new use of those biomarkers. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. So now let's turn to Dr. Murrays and Sultana. What would the qualification of these biomarkers by regulatory agencies mean to a patient?
So for a patient, it means access to these new tests to give more accurate information to say that in some cases, although the kidneys are not functioning well, there's no kidney damage, and that we can work on improving blood flow or hydration to the kidneys to improve the kidney function. In other cases, the markers will say there is kidney damage and that we might stop new medications that have been added or look for other things that are damaging the kidneys. These are fundamental changes in management of patients, which we use available tools for at the moment, but we need better, more sensitive and more specific tools. And these are already beginning to be used for the kind of reasons I mentioned already. And everybody who gets experience with them finds that they're valuable. So we just need this pipeline to accelerate with this new data and get more things in our hands to help patients.
Thank you. Thank you, Glenda, and thank you, Patrick. From a clinical drug development point of view, the new biomarkers would be very useful in helping to monitor kidney safety. The existing tools, as Gary's quite eloquently pointed out in the first talk, are not sensitive enough for detecting kidney injury early. And these new biomarkers will enable us to detect it at an earlier stage or at a lower dose level than the existing standard tests. So from a drug development perspective, having the new biomarkers as a qualified test will allow us to start making patient safety more of a focus in the drug development process. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. And hopefully we'll have more and more patients participating in clinical trials, and these biomarkers will really be helpful in ensuring their safety. So Dr. Bonaventure, can you provide some examples of how BMDR can lead to biomarker qualifications and what you envision as the future state?
Okay, well, I think to add to what's been said and maybe just take it from a little different angle, I think that, again, more information will make all of us in medicine more comfortable with the use of these biomarkers. It will also motivate the accessibility of these markers. that is, companies that build diagnostic machines or make diagnostic tests will incorporate them more and more, specifically if they are qualified and more under more and more conditions. That will provide more data and more comfort. I actually think that with what's been happening in the last few years, I think we're on an exponential curve here. And I know it's been a little bit slower than all of us want over the last 15 or 20 years. But I think I'm certainly motivated to really get these tests in the hands of physicians so that they can begin to be beneficial in the care of patients. And I sort of see that in discussing it with other physicians and with drug development individuals such as Sultana, and with individuals who again are in the business of making tests available for patients. It happens in many other disciplines, and so it should happen more and more in the kidney. And I also want to just say, I would add that patients who don't start off with kidney disease but are treated for another disease, a muscular disease or some other disease that really may have nothing to do with the kidney, may get into problems because of kidney toxicity of the drugs that they're exposed to. So these biomarkers are going to benefit a large swath of the population, even the ones who don't consider themselves kidney patients at this point. Hopefully, they'll prevent patients from becoming kidney patients.
Exactly. Great. And like you, I think as a patient, I can say, I can't wait for these biomarkers to get in the hands of clinicians and they can actually use them with patients and start making a difference in how we're impacted by drugs and therapies that we're using. So as we prepare to close, I have a question for everyone. As we move through the final 5 years of the decade of the kidney, we've witnessed great progress. But please speak to why it's so important to keep advancing science in areas like biomarker research and safety testing. How can this kind of innovation lead to more targeted therapies and real improvements in the lives of patients and their families? Dr. Sultana, let's start with you.
Thank you, Glenda. Well, again, looking at the drug development perspective, if we look back, 7 years now, we had FDA, which has qualified a kidney safety biomarker panel that can be used in phase 1 clinical trials in healthy volunteers. In the next couple of years, we hope to have that same panel be extended to be used in patient studies to monitor kidney safety in an ongoing clinical trial. If I were to look at the future 5 years from now, then I would hope that we start to explore the use of kidney biomarkers to give us very precise information about what pathology is going on inside the kidney, what we would call the liquid biopsy. So you don't have to take a kidney biopsy anymore. You can look at the biomarker pattern in the urine and get good information about what pathology is going on inside the kidney.
That's very exciting. So let's go to Dr. Murray.
So I think success in the rest of the decade of the kidney should mirror success in the rest of medicine. I think the whole trend in medicine for the past 10 or 20 years has been more personalized medicine with more targeted therapies. And we're talking about the tools here that will allow us to target therapies specifically to each patient according to their needs. We put that together with the improved safety of having better markers to prevent damage. And that's a pretty powerful combination, better therapy and better monitoring of patient care. So I think that's where we're going to be at in the next 5 years.
Let's hope so. So Dr. Friedman, what are your thoughts?
When you conduct trials under agreements with regulatory agencies, you begin to collect data and you announce the results of your trial. But the real development, the real advantage to having something like a biomarker data repository, and other organizations are doing similar type things, and we're beginning to create alliances and sharing agreements. If you continue to accrue this data from multiple sources and you know the quality of the instrument, the diagnostic test, then you can gain increasing confidence in the utility of these biomarkers across different groups studied perhaps a few years ago. You can begin to understand in patients from, say, a family with a given kidney disease. You can look at the changes in the biomarkers in somebody who has not quite reached the point of dialysis to a younger person in the family who has no evidence of kidney problems. You can begin to understand the fluctuation of these biomarkers over a longer period of time to give somebody advanced warning that something is or is not developing. So the utility is in continued accrual and repetitive analyses of these done in a way that is responsible as well as statistically valuable. The work that everybody is describing here is work that everybody is dedicated to, because we've all been treating patients with kidney disease for decades now. And we know we have seen improvements, but we know, as Dr. Murray and Dr. Bonventuri were just alluding to, the more tools we have, the more prognostic information we can develop, the more nephrologists and the more patients can be confident in how and when to take new steps to receive new treatments.
Thank you. Again, thank you to all our speakers for sharing the incredible work you're doing.